Maya-chan sat in the back corner of Advanced Xenobiology, her worn military-issue backpack tucked beneath her desk. Around her, alien students from across the Galactic Educational Consortium chatted in their native tongues. The Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter, while the tall, elegant Altarians hummed in harmonious frequencies that made the humans' ears tingle. Professor Kethvar, a distinguished counselor caste Altarian with silver-blue skin and flowing robes, gestured toward the holographic display showing various planetary ecosystems. His voice carried the melodic quality typical of his species as he addressed the diverse classroom. Today we examine the evolutionary patterns of aggressive species across known worlds, Professor Kethvar announced. As we have discussed, most civilizations that develop spacefaring capabilities have evolved beyond primitive territorial behaviors. A few students glanced toward Maya, the only human in the advanced program. She kept her eyes fixed on her notes, fingers moving steadily across her tablet. The other students had long since stopped trying to include her in their study groups or social gatherings. She was polite but distant, never sharing stories about her homeworld or joining the heated debates about galactic politics that often erupted after class. Zixtal, a prominent Zephyrian student whose family held significant political influence in the consortium, raised one of his forearms. "Professor, isn't it true that Earth was only recently admitted to the consortium because they're still considered a developing species? Their violent tendencies are well documented." Maya's pen stopped moving for just a moment before continuing. Professor Kethvar's large, dark eyes briefly met hers before he responded. "The humans have made remarkable progress in a very short time," the professor said diplomatically. "Their admission to the consortium was based on their technological achievements and their commitment to peaceful exploration. But they still maintain standing armies," pressed Velterra, an Altarian whose family served in the consortium's diplomatic corps. "Most civilized species moved beyond such primitive institutions millennia ago." The classroom fell silent except for the soft humming of the environmental systems. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her, waiting to see how the human would react. She had endured similar conversations countless times over the past 2 years at Kepler Academy, the most prestigious university in this sector of space. Perhaps Cadet Chun would share her perspective on human military traditions, Professor Kethvar suggested gently. Maya looked up from her notes, meeting the professor's gaze. Her dark eyes were calm, almost expressionless. "I'm here to study xenobiology, Professor. My personal background isn't relevant to evolutionary patterns." Zixtal's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. How modest. Though I suppose spending one's formative years engaged in primitive combat training doesn't provide much insight into advanced evolutionary theory. A few other students made soft sounds of agreement. Maya's face remained neutral, though her grip on her pen tightened slightly. She had learned long ago that defending humanity's military traditions only reinforced their prejudices. Better to let them think what they wanted. "The Federation Marines serve an important peacekeeping function," Maya said quietly, "just as the consortium maintains its own security forces." "Hardly comparable," Velterra interjected. "The consortium's peacekeepers are highly trained diplomats who resolve conflicts through negotiation and mediation. They rarely need to resort to physical intervention." Professor Kethvar raised a hand to quiet the discussion. "Perhaps we should return to today's lesson. The evolution of cooperative behaviors versus competitive ones provides fascinating insights across all species." Maya returned to her notes, but she could still hear whispered conversations around her. The alien students often discuss humanity's barbaric history during breaks, speaking just loudly enough for her to overhear. They talked about Earth's countless wars, the nuclear weapons still maintained in orbital defense platforms, the Marine Corps that every human colony seemed to maintain. What they didn't know was that Maya had spent 5 years as a combat engineer with the Federation Marines before applying to Kepler Academy. She had seen action on the frontier worlds, places where the consortium's diplomatic solutions meant little when faced with hostile alien fauna or rogue automated defense systems left behind by extinct civilizations. She had earned her place at the academy through academic merit, not political connections or family influence like many of her classmates. Her test scores in mathematics, physics, and biological sciences were among the highest in the school's history. But none of that seemed to matter to her fellow students, who saw only a representative of humanity's supposedly primitive culture. After class, Maya gathered her materials and headed toward the library. She had a research project on symbiotic relationships in extreme environments due next week, and she wanted to access some of the restricted archives that required special permission. As she walked through the corridors of the Academy's main building, she passed groups of students discussing the latest news from the Outer Rim. The consortium had established several new research stations in previously unexplored systems, and there were rumors of significant archaeological discoveries on some of the dead worlds. My cousin is working at the new site on Zirian Prime, she heard one Altarian student telling his friends. He says they found ruins that predate any known civilization. The archaeology team thinks it might be from the precursors. Maya paused, pretending to adjust her backpack while she listened. The precursors were a legendary species that supposedly existed millions of years ago, leaving behind mysterious artifacts throughout the galaxy. Most scholars considered them purely mythical, but recent discoveries had some researchers reconsidering. I heard the research station lost contact 3 days ago, another student whispered. The consortium is calling it a technical malfunction, but my father serves on the Science Council. He says they're sending a full investigation team. Maya continued toward the library, but her mind was racing. Communication breakdowns on remote research stations were more common than the consortium liked to admit. Usually, they were caused by equipment failures or solar interference. But sometimes there were other explanations. The Academy's library was a marvel of alien architecture, with flowing organic curves that seemed to grow from the floor like crystalline trees. Maya made her way to one of the private study chambers and activated the privacy field before accessing her personal communication system. She scrolled through her messages, finding the usual academic correspondence and a few personal notes from her family back on Earth. But buried among them was something that made her breath catch. A coded message with Marine Corps encryption protocols. Maya hesitated before opening it. She had left that life behind when she came to the Academy. She was a student now, focused on building a career in xenobiology and planetary science. But the encryption suggested this was more than a social message from old comrades. The message was brief and formal. Field expertise required for scientific consultation. Volunteer basis only. Reply within 24 hours if interested. It was signed by Commander Sarah Rodriguez, Maya's former commanding officer. The woman who had recommended her for advanced education and helped her transition from military service to academic life. Maya stared at the message for several minutes. Around her, the library hummed with quiet activity as alien students pursued their own research projects. Through the transparent walls of her study chamber, she could see Zixtao and several other students working together at a large table, their animated discussion punctuated by occasional glances in her direction. She closed the message without replying and tried to focus on her research. But concentration proved elusive. Her thoughts kept drifting to the rumors about the lost research station and the mysterious message from Commander Rodriguez. That evening, Maya returned to her small dormitory room in the human quarter of the Academy. The space was spartanly furnished, with a bed, desk, and storage unit that held her few personal possessions. On the wall hung her only decoration, a photograph of her Marine unit taken just before her discharge. She looked at the faces of her former comrades, remembering the missions they had shared on distant worlds. Combat engineers were often called upon to handle situations that required both technical expertise and tactical thinking. They cleared unexploded ordnance from archaeological sites, disabled automated defense systems on dead worlds, and sometimes fought off hostile creatures that standard diplomacy couldn't address. Maya activated her communication console and composed a brief reply to Commander Rodriguez. Available for consultation. Awaiting details. She sent the message before she could second-guess herself. Whatever was happening on that research station, it was significant enough for the Marines to reach out to former personnel. And despite her new life as a student, she couldn't ignore the possibility that people might need help. The next morning brought a priority message with travel authorization and mission briefings. Maya read through the files with growing concern. The research station on Zirian Prime had indeed lost contact, but the last transmission suggested they had discovered something extraordinary in the precursor ruins. More troubling were the automated distress beacons that had activated before communications went dark. The signals indicated multiple casualties and a request for immediate military support. The consortium's official response had been to dispatch a diplomatic team to investigate, but that team was still 3 days away from the remote system. The Marines were sending a small tactical unit to provide security for any survivors, and they needed someone with both military experience and scientific training to assess whatever the researchers had found. Maya packed her few belongings, including some items she hadn't touched in 2 years. Her combat engineering kit, emergency medical supplies, and the small sidearm she was licensed to carry as a reserve Marine officer. She informed her professors that she would be taking a brief leave for family reasons, a common enough occurrence that it raised no suspicions. As she prepared to depart Kepler Academy, Maya caught sight of herself in the mirror. For 2 years, she had tried to blend in with the academic community, downplaying her military background and focusing entirely on her studies. She had endured the subtle discrimination and casual dismissal of her fellow students, always taking the high road and never rising to their provocations. But now she was reminded of who she really was beneath the quiet student facade. She was a Federation Marine, trained to handle situations that were beyond the scope of diplomatic solutions. And somewhere out there, people were in danger because they had ventured into the unknown without understanding what they might find. Maya gathered her gear and headed for the spaceport, leaving behind the sterile corridors of the Academy for something far more dangerous and far more real. She had no way of knowing that within days, footage of her actions would find its way back to Kepler Academy, forever changing how her fellow students viewed both her and humanity as a whole. The Federation Marine transport ship Resilience dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zirian system with a characteristic blue flash of transition drives. Maya felt the familiar sensation of artificial gravity reasserting itself as the ship's systems adjusted to normal space operations. She stood in the briefing room alongside the tactical team that Commander Rodriguez had assembled. Lieutenant Jack Morrison, the team leader, was a veteran of frontier operations with the weathered look of someone who had seen action on a dozen different worlds. Sergeant Kim Park specialized in hostile environment operations, while Corporal David Santos handled communications and electronic warfare. They were all professionals, but Maya could see the questions in their eyes. She was clearly not regular military anymore, and her academic credentials seemed oddly out of place for what was essentially a combat mission. "All right, people," Commander Rodriguez addressed the team via holographic projection from Fleet Command. "Here's what we know. Research Station Omega on Zirian Prime went dark 72 hours ago. Last transmission indicated they had made a significant discovery in the precursor ruins, followed by multiple distress signals. The holographic display showed the barren surface of Zirian Prime, a dead world with no atmosphere and extreme temperature variations. The research station was a cluster of prefabricated structures built around the entrance to an underground complex of alien ruins. Long-range sensors show the station's main power grid is still active, but we're detecting no life signs," the commander continued. "Could be sensor interference from the ruins, or it could mean we're looking at a total loss scenario." Lieutenant Morrison studied the tactical display. "What about the consortium's investigation team?" "Still 2 days out," Rodriguez replied. "And, frankly, they're not equipped for this type of situation. Dr. Chun, I need your assessment of what we might be dealing with." Maya stepped forward, pulling up additional data on her tablet. Based on the research team's preliminary reports, they discovered what appears to be an intact precursor facility. Previous sites have contained advanced technology that we barely understand, including automated defense systems and environmental hazards. So we could be walking into anything, Sergeant Park observed. That's why you're taking full hazmat protocols and combat load, Rodriguez confirmed. Dr. Chun has experience with archaeological sites under hostile conditions. She'll help you identify potential threats and determine what happened to the research team. The commander's expression grew more serious. I want to be clear about something. The official mission is search and rescue with scientific consultation. But if you encounter active precursor technology, your priority is to withdraw immediately and await specialized containment teams. Maya nodded, though she suspected the reality on the ground would be more complicated than the official parameters suggested. She had dealt with alien technology before, and it rarely behaved according to theoretical predictions. The Resilience moved into orbit around Zirian Prime, and Maya got her first close look at the world where she would soon be deploying. The planet's surface was a maze of impact craters and ancient geological formations, with no signs of current geological activity. The research station appeared as a tiny cluster of lights against the vast emptiness. Atmospheric conditions are minimal, Corporal Santos reported as they prepared for deployment. Temperature outside is -40 Celsius, with radiation levels just within acceptable limits for short-term exposure. Maya checked her environmental suit one final time. The Marine Corps gear was more robust than the civilian equipment she had grown accustomed to at the academy, with integrated life support, communications, and basic defensive systems. The team boarded a dropship for the descent to Zirian Prime surface. During the 20-minute flight, Maya reviewed everything she knew about precursor sites. The ancient aliens had left behind ruins on dozens of worlds, but most contained only fragments of their technology. Intact facilities were incredibly rare and potentially very dangerous. Landing in 2 minutes, announced the dropship pilot. Surface winds are negligible, but watch for temperature variations near the geological formations. Maya watched through the viewport as the research station grew larger. She could see the main habitat modules, laboratory structures, and the excavation site where the team had been working. Everything appeared intact from the outside, but she noticed that none of the external lights were functioning properly. The dropship touched down on the prepared landing pad, and the team quickly disembarked. Even through her environmental suit, Maya could feel the intense cold of the airless world. Their boots crunched on the frozen regolith as they moved toward the station's main airlock. No response to standard communication protocols, Corporal Santos reported. But I'm picking up emergency beacon signals from multiple locations inside the facility. Lieutenant Morrison gestured for the team to spread out as they approached the airlock. Dr. Chun, anything unusual about the external systems? Maya studied the station's exterior with the practiced eye of someone who had evaluated dozens of frontier installations. Power grid shows normal readings, but the atmospheric recycling system is running at minimum levels. That suggests the facility is sealed, but not maintaining full life support. The airlock cycled them through into the station's main corridor. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow, and Maya could hear the distant hum of life support systems operating on backup power. Signs of struggle here, Sergeant Park noted, examining scuff marks on the corridor walls. But no obvious weapon damage. Maya nodded, studying the scene with growing unease. Her years of combat engineering had taught her to read the signs of different types of incidents. This didn't look like a hostile attack or equipment failure. They moved deeper into the facility, checking each room methodically. The living quarters were empty, but showed signs of hasty evacuation. Personal belongings were scattered around, and several beds appeared to have been slept in recently. Laboratory section shows more activity. Lieutenant Morrison reported over the comm, Dr. Chun, you need to see this. Maya joined him in the main research lab, where she found banks of computers still running analysis programs on data from the excavation site. The screen showed three-dimensional models of the underground complex, with detailed scans of chambers and corridors that extended deep into Zirian Prime's crust. They found something big, Maya murmured, studying the data. This facility is at least 10 times larger than any previously discovered precursor site. Look at this, Sergeant Parr called from across the lab. She was standing next to a display showing real-time feeds from cameras inside the ruins. Most of the screens showed empty corridors and chambers, but one displayed something that made Maya's breath catch. The camera feed showed a vast circular chamber with walls covered in glowing symbols. In the center of the room stood what appeared to be a control console of some kind, its surface alive with shifting patterns of light. The research team activated something, Maya said, her voice tight with concern. These symbols are definitely active precursor technology. Where's the research team now? Morrison asked. Corporal Santos had been monitoring the emergency beacons. All signals are coming from inside the ruins. They're about 200 meters down in the central chamber complex. Maya studied the architectural scans, comparing them with her knowledge of other precursor sites. Most facilities have multiple levels with increasing security as you go deeper. If the team is in the central chambers, they may have triggered automated systems. Automated systems that do what? Morrison pressed. Unknown, Maya admitted. But precursor technology tends to be defensive in nature. The sites we've studied before had systems designed to contain or neutralize intruders. The team gathered their equipment and headed for the excavation site. The entrance to the ruins was a tunnel carved through solid rock, leading to an artificial chamber where the research team had set up their initial base camp. Maya could see immediately that something had gone wrong. The camp showed signs of rapid abandonment, with equipment scattered around and several environmental suits lying empty on the ground. Biosignatures, Sergeant Park announced, reading her scanner. Faint but present. The team is alive, but readings suggest they're in some kind of altered state. Maya examined one of the abandoned environmental suits. The seals were intact, and the life support system was still functional, but the suit had been carefully removed rather than torn off. They took off their protective gear voluntarily. That suggests they weren't under immediate physical threat, or they were influenced by something that made them believe they didn't need protection, Morrison suggested grimly. The entrance to the deeper ruins was marked by an archway covered in the same glowing symbols they had seen in the camera feeds. Maya approached it carefully, using her scanner to take readings of the electromagnetic signatures. Definite energy patterns, she reported, but nothing immediately dangerous to organic life. The symbols seemed to be some kind of communication system. Communication with who? Santos asked. Maya studied the patterns more closely, comparing them with data from her tablet. The research team's notes suggest these symbols respond to mental activity. It's possible the precursors built interfaces designed to interact directly with conscious minds. Mind control. Morrison's voice carried a note of alarm. More like mental communication, Maya clarified. But the implications are still concerning. If the research team established contact with active precursor systems, they might be experiencing something beyond our understanding. The team proceeded into the ruins, following the path marked by the research team's equipment. The corridors were constructed from a material that seemed to absorb and reflect their lights in strange ways, creating shadows that shifted and danced as they moved. Maya felt a growing sense of unease as they descended deeper into the facility. The walls were covered with symbols that seemed to react to their presence, glowing brighter as they passed and fading again behind them. Environmental readings are getting strange, Santos reported. Atmospheric composition is changing as we go deeper. Oxygen levels are actually increasing. The facility is generating breathable atmosphere, Maya realized. The precursors designed this place to support organic life. They reached a junction where multiple corridors branched off in different directions. Maya consulted the research team's maps, trying to determine which path led to the central chambers where the emergency beacons were located. This way, she indicated, pointing toward a corridor that sloped steeply downward. But we need to be prepared for anything. If the facility is actively responding to our presence, it may try to influence us the same way it affected the research team. As they moved deeper into the precursor ruins, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far beyond their ability to control or understand. The quiet student who had spent 2 years enduring the casual dismissal of her alien classmates was gone, replaced by the combat engineer who knew how to function in hostile environments. But even her military training might not be enough for what lay ahead in the depths of Zirian Prime. The central chamber of the precursor facility was beyond anything Maya had imagined. The space was vast, with a domed ceiling that seemed to stretch impossibly high above them. Every surface was covered with the glowing symbols, creating patterns that shifted and flowed like living things. In the center of the chamber stood 12 members of the research team, arranged in a perfect circle around the control console Maya had seen in the camera feeds. They stood motionless, their eyes closed, their faces peaceful. None of them wore environmental suits or protective gear. Life signs are stable, Sergeant Park reported, scanning the research team with her medical sensors. But their brain activity is off the charts. Whatever they're experiencing, it's intense. Maya approached the circle cautiously, studying the symbols that covered the control console. The patterns were incredibly complex, layers upon layers of meaning that seemed to shift depending on how she looked at them. Dr. Chun, one of the research team members, spoke without opening her eyes. Maya recognized Dr. Sarah Voss, the lead archaeologist who had discovered the site. "We've been waiting for you." "Dr. Voss? Can you hear me?" Maya asked, staying outside the circle of researchers. "We can hear everything," Dr. Voss replied, her voice strangely calm. "The precursors are showing us things. Incredible things. The history of the galaxy, the rise and fall of countless civilizations, the patterns that connect all conscious life." Lieutenant Morrison moved to Maya's side, his weapon ready but not raised. "Dr. Voss, we're here to evacuate you. The research station has lost communication with the outside." "Communication." Dr. Voss smiled without opening her eyes. "Yes, communication is the key. The precursors try to teach other species, but they weren't ready. They couldn't understand the deeper connections." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air of the chamber. She had seen this kind of behavior before on worlds where human researchers had encountered alien technology beyond their understanding. Sometimes the technology was benevolent, sometimes it wasn't, but it always changed the people who interacted with it. "What are the precursors showing you?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice calm and professional. "The truth about consciousness," Dr. Voss replied. "About how minds can link across space and time. About the network that connects all thinking beings in a galaxy." The symbols on the control console began to pulse with increased intensity, and Maya felt something probing at the edges of her thoughts. It wasn't hostile exactly, but it was alien in a way that made her skin crawl. "Dr. Chun," Corporal Santos warned over the comm, "I'm picking up massive energy signatures building throughout the facility. Whatever this system is doing, it's drawing power from multiple sources." Maya backed away from the control console, but the mental pressure continued to build. She could feel the alien intelligence behind the symbols trying to establish contact, offering her the same knowledge it had given the research team. For a moment, she was tempted. The promise of understanding the deepest mysteries of the galaxy was almost irresistible. But her military training kicked in, recognizing the danger of losing herself to alien influence. "Team, fall back to minimum safe distance," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of her old rank. "Whatever this system is, it's trying to influence our minds." "But you could learn so much," Dr. Voss said, finally opening her eyes. They glowed with the same soft light as the symbols on the walls. "The precursors chose humanity for a reason. Your species has something the others lack." "What do you mean?" Maya asked. though she continued to back toward the chamber entrance. Adaptability, Dr. Voss replied. The Altarians are too rigid in their thinking. The Zephyrians are too focused on individual achievement. But humans can change. You can grow. You can become something more than you were. The glow in Dr. Voss's eyes intensified, and Maya felt the mental pressure increase dramatically. The alien intelligence was no longer content to wait for her permission. It was trying to force the connection. Maya did the only thing her training had taught her to do when facing an unknown alien threat. She fought back. Drawing on years of mental conditioning and combat discipline, she erected every psychological barrier she had ever learned. The meditation techniques the Marines taught for dealing with hostile psychic phenomena. The focus exercises that help soldiers function under extreme stress. The sheer stubborn human refusal to surrender when faced with impossible odds. The alien intelligence recoiled, clearly surprised by the resistance. Maya felt it probe her defenses, looking for weaknesses, trying to understand how a single human mind could withstand pressure that had overwhelmed an entire research team. Interesting, Dr. Voss said, tilting her head as if listening to something only she could hear. They say you're stronger than expected, more military in your thinking. That's right, Maya said, her voice steady despite the ongoing mental assault. I'm a Federation Marine, and I don't surrender my mind to anyone. The symbols on the walls began to flash more rapidly, and Maya realized the facility was responding to her resistance with something like excitement. The alien intelligence wasn't angry at her defiance. It was intrigued. Dr. Chun, Lieutenant Morrison called urgently. We need to move. The energy readings are spiking throughout the entire complex. Maya made a decision that would haunt her for years afterward. Instead of retreating, she stepped closer to the control console. If the precursor system was this interested in human consciousness, she needed to understand why. Maya, don't, Sergeant Park warned, but Maya was already reaching toward the glowing symbols. The moment her gloved hand made contact with the console, the world exploded into light and sensation. Maya found herself standing in a vast space that existed outside normal reality, surrounded by beings of pure thought and energy. The precursors. They were ancient beyond imagination, their civilization having peaked millions of years before humans had even evolved. They had explored every corner of the galaxy, cataloged every form of life, and eventually transcended physical existence entirely. But they had left something behind, a network of consciousness that spanned the galaxy, connecting every thinking being in ways they couldn't understand. The Altarians experienced it as intuitive harmony. The Zephyrians felt it as competitive drive. Humans, however, were different. Humans could consciously access the network. They could communicate across vast distances, share knowledge instantly, and coordinate activities on a galactic scale. The precursors have been waiting millions of years for a species with that capability. Maya saw flashes of possible futures. Humanity taking its place as the coordinators of galactic civilization. Human minds serving as bridges between species that had never truly understood each other. The end of war, hunger, and isolation across the galaxy. But she also saw the cost. Humans who joined the network permanently lost their individual identities, becoming nodes in a vast consciousness that spanned star systems. They gained incredible knowledge and power, but they were no longer truly human. Choose. The precursor presence whispered in her mind. Your species can ascend to become the galaxy's guides, or you can remain as you are, limited but free. Maya's response surprised even herself. We'll find our own way. The alien intelligence paused, clearly not expecting that answer. You reject transcendence? I reject losing what makes us human, Maya replied firmly. If we're going to evolve, it'll be on our terms. We don't need to become something else to make a difference in the galaxy. The precursor presence seemed to consider this for a long moment. Then, to Maya's amazement, it began to withdraw from the research team. One by one, the scientists collapsed as the alien influence left their minds. "Remarkable," the presence said as it faded. "Perhaps there is wisdom in choosing limitation. We will watch with interest to see what path your species follows." Maya found herself back in the physical chamber, surrounded by confused researchers and relieved Marines. The glowing symbols on the walls were dimming, and the oppressive sense of alien presence was dissipating. "What happened?" Dr. Voss asked groggily, looking around in confusion. "The last thing I remember was activating the console. You've been under alien influence for 3 days," Lieutenant Morrison explained. Dr. Chun managed to break the connection. As the team helped the researchers evacuate the facility, Maya found herself thinking about what she had experienced. The precursors had offered humanity incredible power, but at the cost of everything that made them human. She had chosen to reject that offer, but she wondered if she had made the right decision. The evacuation went smoothly, and within hours the entire research team was safely aboard the Resilience. The consortium's investigation team arrived as scheduled, but they found only inactive ruins with no signs of the advanced technology that had been present before. Maya spent the return journey writing her report, trying to explain what had happened in terms that wouldn't cause panic among the galactic community. She described the incident as a malfunction of automated systems rather than an attempt at species-wide assimilation. But she couldn't stop thinking about the broader implications. The other species in the consortium had dismissed humanity as primitive and violent, but the precursors had seen something different. They had recognized a potential in human consciousness that even humans themselves didn't fully understand. When the Resilience returned to consortium space, Maya prepared to resume her studies at Kepler Academy. But she knew things would be different now. She had discovered something about her species that changed everything. Commander Rodriguez had one final conversation with her before she departed. "The mission recordings will be classified," she said, "but word gets around in the Corps. People are going to know you faced down alien mind control and won." "I didn't win," Maya replied quietly. "I just chose differently than they expected." "Sometimes that's the same thing," Rodriguez smiled. "Take care of yourself, Dr. Chun. Something tells me the galaxy is going to need more humans like you." Maya returned to Kepler Academy with a new understanding of her place in the galactic community. She was no longer the quiet student trying to blend in with more advanced civilizations. She was a human, with all the unique strengths and weaknesses that entailed. 3 days after her return, Corporal Santos's mission recordings somehow found their way onto the Academy's network. Students across campus watched in amazement as Maya Chun, the quiet human they had dismissed as primitive, calmly faced down alien technology that had overwhelmed a team of PhD researchers. The footage showed her standing alone in the precursor chamber, surrounded by the glowing symbols, refusing to surrender her consciousness despite overwhelming alien pressure. They watched her make the choice to remain human rather than transcend into something greater but fundamentally different. The alien students who had mocked humanity's violent tendencies fell silent as they realized what they had witnessed. Maya hadn't needed weapons or aggression to handle the crisis. She had used something uniquely human, the ability to choose her own path despite overwhelming pressure to conform. When Maya walked into advanced xenobiology the following week, the classroom was different. Instead of the usual dismissive glances and whispered comments, she found respectful attention and genuine curiosity. Her fellow students wanted to understand not just what she had done, but how human consciousness could function in ways that their own species couldn't match. Professor Kethvar opened the class with a new topic, the study of consciousness as an evolutionary adaptation. As he discussed the various ways that different species process information and made decisions, he frequently referred to recent discoveries about human neural patterns. Maya took her usual seat in the back corner, but now the other students turned to listen when she spoke. They had learned that the quiet human in their class carried knowledge and experience that their textbooks couldn't teach. The footage of her confrontation with the precursor technology spread beyond Kepler Academy, eventually reaching universities and research institutions throughout consortium space. Xenopsychologists studied her actions, trying to understand how a single human mind had resisted influence that should have been overwhelming. Military strategists analyzed the implications of her resistance, wondering what it meant for humanity's role in galactic defense. If humans could resist alien mental influence, they might be valuable in situations where other species would be helpless. But for Maya, the most important change was in how she saw herself. She was no longer trying to prove that humans belonged in the galactic community. She had discovered that humanity already had its own unique place, one that couldn't be filled by any other species. As she continued her studies in xenobiology, Maya began to focus on a new area of research: the evolutionary advantages of psychological diversity. Different species had evolved different ways of thinking, and those differences were strengths rather than weaknesses. The Altarians' harmony made them excellent coordinators and diplomats. The Zephyrians' competitive drive pushed them to achieve remarkable individual accomplishments. And humans' stubborn independence allowed them to resist external influence while adapting to new circumstances. Maya's professors took notice of her new research direction, and she found herself invited to present papers at conferences throughout consortium space. She spoke about the value of maintaining species diversity rather than seeking universal standards of advancement. Her message resonated with many in the scientific community who had grown concerned about the homogenizing effects of galactic civilization. Maya argued that the galaxy needed its Altarian diplomats, its Zephyrian innovators, and its human wildcards working together rather than trying to become more alike. The quiet student who had once endured casual discrimination became a respected voice in xenocultural studies. But Maya never forgot the lesson of the precursor facility. Sometimes the most important choice is to remain true to what you are, even when offered the chance to become something more. Years later, when other human students arrived at Kepler Academy, they found a very different environment than the one Maya had endured. The alien students no longer dismissed human contributions to galactic civilization. They had learned to respect the unique strengths that each species brought to the cosmic community. And in the archives of the Academy's library, students could access the footage of Maya Chun standing alone in an alien chamber, choosing to remain human when offered transcendence. It became required viewing for courses on xenocultural studies, a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing who you are and refusing to become anything else. The quiet student soldier had shown the galaxy that humanity's place in the cosmic community wasn't about becoming more like the other species. It was about bringing their own unique perspective to challenges that no one else could handle. Maya Chun had faced the unknown and emerged still human, still herself, but stronger for having made that choice. The galaxy was a richer place for having humans in it, not despite their differences from other species, but because of them. And Maya continued her studies, knowing that her people had found their place among the stars not by changing who they were, but by embracing it.